Well, live in Jerusalem is Israel's Economy Minister Naftali Bennett. Very good afternoon to you, Mr. Bennett. In this conflict so far, more than 700 people have died in Gaza, many of them children, many of them women. Can you justify this continued bloodshed?
Hamas shot at Israel over 2,000 rockets without any provocation. They're shooting from within women and children, from within schools, within houses, within hospitals, in order for their own women and children to die, so then they can conduct or create pressure on Israel. Effectively, Hamas is killing its own people. This is immoral, unacceptable, and we expect them to stop shooting and to disarm, and at that very moment, the whole thing stops.
But you say they're killing their own people, but it's Israeli shells, rockets, bullets that are killing these women and children, many innocent civilians. How can this carry on for the foreseeable future justifiably? Imagine if
on London you'd have about 200 rockets falling a day from a terror group, a radical terror group. So are you effectively saying you have the theoretical right to defend yourselves, but practically you can't do anything? No, we have to stop this. If we want it to stop, we have to also stop the funding. The biggest funder of radical Islam terror is Qatar. We have to get Qatar to stop funding Hamas, Al-Qaeda, Al-Nusra, ISIS with money. And you know Qatar is expected to host the World Games, the World Cup, and we have to call on FIFA, cancel that. Don't allow them to host the World Cup, because this is a terror state who's funding most of the world terror. If they stop the money, terror will stop and this whole thing stops.
Sure, that's something that for the long term, I'm sure will be discussed. But in the short term, this conflict needs to be brought to an end. And for those people in Gaza, in a very small space where the fighting is very intense, they have nowhere to go. There is nowhere safe for these people.
No, that's not accurate. Before we attack any area that is shooting on us, we call on them again and again and again, send leaflets, phone calls,
send the leaflets,
SMSs,
but there is
everything
nowhere
we can
for them
do.
to go. There are UN compounds where there's more than 100,000 people, but they can't actually leave these areas because it's not safe for them to leave. The fighting's continuing. They're trapped in Gaza. There are no borders open. These people can't get to safety. There is no safety for them.
If your home was shot with a dozen rockets, what would you do?
But that's not the question. The question is, how do you prevent these civilians?
That's precisely the question.
The question is, how do you
That's
prevent
precisely
these
the question. You see, because it's very convenient.
Deaths?
It's very convenient to sit in a studio and ask these questions. It's my 4 children in Ra'anana that are being targeted. It's very convenient to sit on the sidelines and ask about that. But Hamas is deliberately putting its women and children around those missile launchers in order for them to die, in order for you to ask me those questions. They need to stop shooting. The moment they stop shooting, this whole thing goes away. We gave them one ceasefire, a second one, a third one. I don't think any country in the world would go to these lengths when a terror group is, with an unprovoked fashion, targeting its own civilians.
Many people understand that. Indeed, the international community, we've had the British Foreign Secretary back you up on that. Israel absolutely has the right to defend itself. The difficulty is for many who are watching these awful pictures is that they're asking why Israel can't do more to try and protect those civilians while they carry out this military operation.
You know, there's 5 million Israelis in shelters for the past 3 weeks. Imagine if, 70% of Britons were now in shelters, incurring missiles all across England, in London, in Manchester, in Leeds. What would Britain do? Would it just sit in the sidelines and be very cautious? Is that what you did in the past? Is that what was done in Afghanistan? Is that what was done in World War II? You fight back. There is no proportionality when you fight terror. Terror is evil. Terror's target is to kill civilians, and we have to fight them. And I call on Hamas to stop this despicable modus operandi of pushing their women and children. We found missiles inside schools, for heaven's sakes. The UN officially said that not once but twice, all across Gaza. They're using you, the global media, in order to continue killing their own citizens and Israelis. The moment Hamas disarms and stops shooting, the whole conflict goes away.
Isn't there a sense of futility about all of this? Sure, you might succeed in destroying some of these tunnels. Sure, you might succeed in disarming Hamas. But it's all in the short term, isn't it? Doesn't the end game, the long term, have to be some kind of peaceful resolution? Otherwise, in a couple of years, you'll just find yourself back in the same situation.
You know, we pulled out of the Gaza Strip 9 years ago, back to the 67 lines, just like the whole international community wanted. We pushed out all the Jews that were living there. There's not one Jew, not one Israeli living in the Gaza Strip. The world said they're going to build a Singapore in the Middle East. Then they got billions of dollars, and instead of building the Singapore with schools and hospitals and the community centers, they invested all this money in terror tunnels underground, in missile launchers, in thousands of missile launchers. It's their choice. And your question, where does it all go? It's up to them. You know, unlike the UK, we're surrounded by 300 million Muslims. Many of them are radical Muslims. It's tough, but we're a free country in a very difficult place. We're fighting the same war that'll get back to you. And I would expect anyone who's decent-hearted to support us in this fight for freedom. And no one wants to kill civilians, but they're shooting at us. We're not shooting at them. We're shooting back at the missile launchers. And they're using their women and children so cowardly.
Unfortunately, the longer this goes on for Israel, it's counterproductive because Hamas gains more support around the world.
Well, anyone who supports Hamas is immoral. And the only moral thing is for them to stop shooting at Israel, and at that very moment, we stop shooting. What's a better deal? What's a more fair deal? What do we want? We want to live side by side. We pulled out. We have no claim for Gaza. We don't want to return to Gaza. It's them who are running after us, because what happened is we handed them the land, and they turned it into a fortress of terror. We have to dismantle this fortress. Unless you're willing to come and do the job, I'd love that to happen.
Okay, Naftali Bennett, thanks for your time today. Thank you.
Thank you.